Hi, welcome to Elevate. My name is Angie Chang, founder of Girl Geek X. Thank you for joining us. We have over 1,000 women signed up to tune in to our full day of inspiring talks and content from CTOs to developers, data analysts, cybersecurity gurus, people who are doing mid-career transitions, people who are doing resume reviews. If you've already sent in your resumes, we should have it in the stack to review live today. And we would love to see where everyone's dialing in from. So if you want to put in the chat where you're dialing in from and what's your goal for attending Elevate this week. And also, another fun icebreaker question for you is who would you love to see keynote at our next Elevate conference? We want to hear about the inspiring women in tech that you have always wanted to hear from, and maybe we can see if we can get them for our next event. My name's Angie Chang again, and I started Girl Geek X in 2008 with the free Girl Geek dinner series that started at Google. We had over 400 Girl Geeks sign up in 5 days, and everyone was blown away by just the response. We had to shut down registrations, have a giant white tent by Charlie's Cafe, and people were like, wow, that's a lot of women at a Girl Geek dinner because in London, they only had a small room full of a few dozen if they were on a good day. So I was like, wow, there's a lot of women here. I'm in the East Bay of California, went to Berkeley, and I kind of stayed in the area, and I really love it. And I would like to see more women in tech kind of come together for dinner. So we've been doing Girl Geek dinners since then. We've done so many Girl Geek dinners. We've had them at companies like Khan Academy, Stripe, OpenAI, and Slack. And I'm naming these companies because I just fondly remember the women who told me that they got a job at these companies after the Girl Geek dinner. So at the end of the day, it's not just that people are networking and hearing from inspiring women, eating the food, looking around, getting a sense of the culture. They're also learning about the roles there and getting recruited and getting their next awesome job in tech and being that role model. And oftentimes speaking at our Elevate events and Girl Geek dinners and sponsoring them. So we love them. So Girl Geek Dinners has definitely helped so many women, I think, feel inspired to move their goalposts at work, to give a tech talk, to kind of go for the next promotion, to maybe network amongst yourselves to figure out what are the great companies and jobs to go for. Since I know like majors like data science and AI don't really exist or are slowly beginning to exist. But as the world and technology and industries are always evolving, it's important to stay up to date. We do have a call for proposals I wanted to bring up. It's a link on our website, and we do have a rolling open call for submissions. So a lot of our speakers are recruited from that list. So if you have a talk or two or three that you want to give, we will come back to you maybe next month, maybe in a year, and say, hey, this looks like a great fit for our conference. And we also want to say we work with sponsors who want to insert their speaker as, say, a keynote speaker, or if they want to recruit from our community, or sometimes we hear that they want to get some community logo branding and partnership with us. So definitely talk to us. We are open for discussions. I think everything is very unique and customized these days in terms of how we work with our partners. So I hope you had a good morning with our speed networking, with 101 speed networking. And there's more networking to come. We have the chat. We have so many ways in AirMeet for you to connect with other women. You can message people, you can create group messages, you can also go into the social lounge, you can pop into the fluid lounge after the day. It's a really fun way to have a kind of organic hallway conversation. Hopefully, I'll see some of you there. And today we'll be hearing from inspiring women who are experts on everything from engineering to product, from inspiring career transitions to the cutting edge of AI tech for your career. We'll be hearing from data analysts to cybersecurity and leadership and followership, and more relevant critical workplace and tech topics. And we really want to say thank you for helping a girl geek land her next job in tech. And thank you to 18C for all of your support and enthusiasm for women in tech and for your partnership in recruiting and retaining and working on building up women in tech. And we can't wait for you to meet our employers at booth hour at noon Pacific and to hear about the jobs that are mostly remote in some cities like San Francisco and New York and cities around the world. So please tune in for that. And whether you're actively looking for a new opportunity or not, or likely you know someone who is, please pass along the word about these great companies and about the talks that are happening today and the resume review workshops. So, all of our talks are recorded. They will be shared on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/girlgeekx. So please don't fret. If you can't tune in live today, the talks will be available later or in this AirMeet platform until we get them onto the YouTube. So, and in today's critical economic climate, it's sponsorship that keeps our organization afloat and organizing these events for the next decade to come. So I really appreciate your continued support of our initiative to put more women on stage as expert speakers, role models, and to create crucial connections for and future friendships, and maybe even future coworkers and co-conspirators. So, without further ado, our keynote speaker is Rachel Laycock. She is the Chief Technology Officer at Thoughtworks, and she will be sharing her career journey from developer to CTO at Thoughtworks. And welcome, Rachel.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. No technical difficulties. Always a good start. Well, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I have my own little Girl Geek Dinners story that I will kind of weave into what I want to talk about today. As some of you might know, Girl Geek Dinners started in London, and that was where I lived for a period of time. But before I jump into that, I just want to talk about what I'm going to cover today. So it's always really difficult to compress like 20 years of a career and 40 years of your life into a very like condensed 30 to 40 minutes. So I will do my best and try and keep track of the questions and thoughts and stuff that come up, and hopefully answer along the way as well as at the end. Um, One of the things I always think about when I do these kinds of talks, and I don't know if anyone remembers this, but there was this song, I think it was in the late 90s or early 2000s, that was called the Sunscreen song, but I don't think it was actually called that. But it was basically Baz Luhrmann talking over this very like serene music and giving advice. And one of the things that he says at the start is, if I could offer you one tip for the future, sunscreen would be it. The long-term benefits of sunscreen have been proved by scientists, whereas the rest of my advice has no basis more reliable than my own meandering experience, and I will dispense this advice now. And I think that's true of anybody that's doing any talk around a career, because at the end of the day, a career is as unique as a person. So I'm going to talk about, my story, and some of that hopefully resonates and you get some good takeaways from it. But, just be mindful that it's my story and it's my experience, and it's in no way a path for people that they should follow. And there was plenty of mistakes and challenges along the way, and I'll share some of those. So first of all, you may have guessed that I am not from the US. I am, as I said, I used to live in London, but I'm originally from the north of England, and actually from a city called Leeds. And Leeds at the time, it's kind of an up and coming city now, but at the time it's in the early 80s, was very working class, very blue collar. My dad was a engineer. My mum was a stay-at-home mom who did part-time jobs. And my family was not in a good financial state. I was always very aware of that growing up. And it was also around the time, because I'm one of 4 children, so I have 2 brothers and a sister. So I spent a lot of time in front of the TV, and big fan of movies and TV, still am. And one of the things I would see, especially in the 80s, is like women in power suits with massive telephones and huge shoulder pads, really controlling their life, being able to do what they wanted, having money, and doing whatever. And then I looked at the women that were in my life, most of which were, mothers and stay-at-home mothers. And there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mother, but it is very challenging, especially when you don't have a lot of income. And thinking, I think I want the life on the TV. That's what I'm after. And that was my goal. And my parents drummed into me that to get out of the challenging poverty situation we were in, education was the key. And that's really what I focused on. And I was fortunate enough to, have the academic smarts to do well, and get myself into university. And I couldn't tell you if I'm one of the first people in my family to go to university or not. I have a big family. My parents are both one of six. It's hard to keep track of that many people. But certainly in my generation, as one of the first, and my cousins and brothers and stuff have said that, I inspired them to go on after that. So when I went to university, there's a lot of, I loved it. I had a really good time, as most people do at university. But I also worked really hard, and people would say, "You're always in the computer labs. You're always working. Like, how do you do it? Or like, how do you stay so motivated?" And many of my peers came from maybe more middle-class backgrounds. They didn't have to worry about paying their way through university. I had to work the whole time. There was no, I did get some financial aid and support to get into university and pay for my degree. But that was really it. And I had a very kind of one-track mind of must get good job at the end of this so that I can be free and wear a suit. Maybe not the 80s power suits, but certainly in my mind, it was good job and money equals freedom. That's what I'm going after. So even though I would have a good time at university, I was very dedicated and spent a lot of time in the labs, and I didn't have my own computer because I couldn't afford one. So I was always in the university labs, and basically every night until it shut down. The technicians knew me very well. I was always like, the printer's not working. This isn't working. This isn't working. So as I said, I was massively into media and storytelling and movies and TV. So my first degree was not actually computer science. It was in media technology. And as part of that degree, there was some electronic pieces to it, which I did okay with, but there was also some programming randomly. And we did C programming and C++. And most of the class struggled with it because that wasn't kind of their default or initial path. But I found it really fun. I loved building stuff out of nothing, building out Hello World apps. I loved solving problems, tidying chaos. And I just kind of fell in love with just sitting and coding, basically. And as I was finishing my degree, because not only was I from a low economic background, I was living in the university was in a depressed economic area. And at the time, the university, there was also a skill set need in technology skills. And so they were paying people to do master's degrees in IT. They were also actually doing golden hellos for what they were calling a golden hello, paying people to go and be an IT teacher and paying off their student loans to do it. So a lot of my friends kind of went down that path. But I was like, no, I'm not really want to be a teacher. I'm still 80s power suit in mind. That's my goal. I want to be a business leader. And so I got paid to do my master's, but I also still had to work throughout it because although they were paying for my master's, they weren't giving me an income. So I needed a job. So I took on a part-time admin job. And that was, back in the days where they hired a lot of people just to input data into systems. I don't even know if they do that anymore, probably not, but it was certainly a big thing in the early 2000s. And I would see there was an IT department that was next door, and I would see these guys running around like chaos, totally overwhelmed, too much work to do. And the head of the admins went into their office one day because they were like, "Oh, we need help hiring somebody. We don't have time. Can you help us?" And she said, "I don't know if this is useful to you, but there is a girl next door who's got a degree in this," or something to that effect. And they were like, "That is useful. Could we trial her for a week?" And they had me writing these insane stored procedures. They basically implemented a new system, and the system, all the business leaders wanted to run reports off it. And in order to do that, you had to write these insane, long and complex stored procedures. And I was quite happy to do that. And they paid me a little bit more. And I continued to do that throughout my master's degree. And then they offered me a full-time job after that as a DBA. Which, given that I was doing a master's degree and working part-time, I didn't actually have a lot of time to go and look for a job. So being offered a job right out of university was awesome. And I did that for about a year. But I did start to get a little bored. It was kind of tedious and the same thing. Like they put me through lots of training, but it was basically just, here's this insane stored procedure, edit it, or here's like write another insane stored procedure. And I wanted to do something a little bit more exciting and a little bit more creative. And around that time, there was this little thing that people may have heard of, that was this Facebook thing that was happening at the time. And me and my friends were constantly on it. This is in the early days of Facebook, so when it was cool. And just constantly posting pictures of our lives, talking about what we were doing. And it kind of opened my eyes that there's this whole other area of like building products and web development that might be interesting. So, and I even remember actually, like when I was studying my degree, people were like, why are you doing that? The dot-com bubble has burst. You're not going to get a job at the end of it. And I'm like, but they just paid me to do my master's. That can't be true. But obviously companies and businesses are still building out applications. But certainly the web area was very slow until social media like picked that back up again. And so I went to work for a product company. And that was really fun because this product company was doing this brand new thing called Agile. And one of the things I didn't love about being a DBA is just sitting with my headphones on, writing procedures all day. The idea of working in a team and solving problems together and working on different parts of the code base was like super excited to me. But around that time, because I was about mid-20s, a lot of it, I called it the great like drift of, there were people that were like, okay, I'm going to settle down and get married and have kids. And there were people like, I think I want to do this career thing. And most of us that drifted into the career phase, and I did it fairly intentionally, I was like, I'm not quite ready for that yet. I definitely want to keep going with the career. We went down to London because that's where things were happening. That's the big city. And one of the first companies I worked for was a media agency where you're just constantly building like website after website. I enjoyed the work. The work was interesting. But they were doing like a very traditional like waterfall approach, right? So there's the client asks for something, it goes through the account manager, that goes through the PM, it goes through the designers, and it gets to the front end developers and some BAs and QAs thrown in there. And at some point it would land on my desk as the back end developer. And if there was any issues or questions, everything went through these Jira tickets. And it was so slow and painful and seemed to not really make sense in my head at the time. Anyway, one day the PM goes on leave, who was kind of the orchestrator of all this craziness, and said, hey, like if you have, I said to the account manager, if you had questions, you can kind of throw them in the Jira tickets and the team will respond. So I'm going back and forth with the account manager one day over Jira tickets. And I'm like, this is like, she's not understanding what I'm saying. I'm not understanding what she's saying. We've come from completely different worlds. I'm like, this is going to be so much easier if I just go and talk to her. So I was like, where do you sit? And at this point, I was on the third floor. There was designers on one side, developers on the other side. So we kind of knew each other and we would say hello to each other and we would, hang out and go to the pub. We're in London. So like going to the pub is a whole thing all the time. And then on the fourth floor, I believe, was the account managers and the project managers. And then the QAs and the BA, everyone was on a different floor. No one talked to anybody. And I go up to the floor where the PMs and account managers are on. And I swear to you, people were like, what is she doing here? Is she lost? No one had seen a developer walk on that floor before or come and ask the question. Most of the developers were quite happy to sit with their headphones on, not talking to anybody and managing everything through Jira tickets. But yeah, me and the account manager sat down, we worked through all the issues and we solved everything pretty quickly because of those conversations. And when I actually left that company, people said to me, you're one of the few people that's left where people from different departments turned up. Because by that point, I started solving that problem that way all the time. If there was an issue where the designer was trying to draw out something on a web page that back then you couldn't do in a web page, and the JavaScript developers were like, can't do that, computer says no. And I'd be like, it'd be much easier if we just went to talk to them and collaborated on like what it can do. And I said to the designers, I was like, hey, a lot of what you guys put forward, it just doesn't work. We can't achieve that. Like maybe we could co-create some of the ideas that you have. And they were like, yeah, that would be great. So when I left, there was designers, there was the writers, there was the PMs and the account managers actually coming for my leaving drinks. And that was super unusual. But as much as I enjoyed some of that work, I was also trying to like essentially introduce agile like on the side, like shadow agile, right? So I'm getting people to collaborate and have conversations instead of doing everything through Jira tickets. And I started to throw the idea around with the other senior developers that like maybe this is something we should do as like a real process. And most of them were like, no, thanks. I don't want to do that. And because I wasn't a senior developer, I didn't actually get to make that decision. So I had to just continue with my secret agile. But, you know, it was also in the middle of the global financial crisis. So a lot of people were like hanging on to their jobs and a lot of people were getting laid off. And this was in 2008. And so even though, you know, there was a lot of things that I wasn't loving about the role I was doing, I also didn't want to be without a job and be penniless in London because that would be no fun in your 20s whatsoever. So anyway, I knew that it wasn't going well, but I think the nail in the coffin really was when one of the senior engineers had left and people thought, oh, I'll probably be up for the promotion, and I didn't get it and somebody else did. And I was like, okay, fine, that person's kind of on the same level as me, whatever. And then another senior engineer left, and at that time everyone was like, Rachel's definitely like, that's definitely your role. I mean, it was kind of like one of those known things but not said. In fact, some people did say it, but you know, one-on-one. And then the person that I just trained, who just joined the company, got the role instead of me. And I remember when it was announced by email, I just remember being completely distraught and being like, okay, what have I missed? Am I not good at this? Is like, what am I missing here? And I'd learned long before then not to cry and get emotional at work. So I took myself out of the office. The office was near the Thames. I walked down to the Thames. I kind of leaned over, felt really sorry for myself and angry and upset. And when I calmed down, I went back to the office and got on with my day, basically, and was like, well, that's that. I guess I'm not that great. I guess I'm not as good as I think I am. And maybe I'm not ready for that. Nobody had a conversation with me. Anyway, a couple of the senior devs that I was, you know, good friends with said, you want to come to the pub tonight? And I'm like, not really feeling it tonight. I think I'm just going to go hang out with my friends or go home. And they're like, no, we really think you should. And they sat me down in a circle. I remember it so distinctly. And they were like, you need to quit. And I was like, what? And they were like, so we heard that the CTO, who was my boss's boss, said, well, I can't promote a woman. Like, they're too emotional. And I was just stunned, absolutely stunned. And I was like, wow, this was the first time I'd really experienced like straight up discrimination on something like that. I hadn't experienced it. This was like 7 years into my career. I hadn't really experienced anything like that before. And so then I started looking around for other roles. And the next role I found was in a product company who was, you know, doing agile and stuff. And I thought this will be really good for me to get back into that kind of environment. They're doing the kinds of things that I want to do. But that was also a really challenging role because one of the developers that was on my team was a real bully and really belittled and made me feel terrible in like when we were pairing one-on-one, and it just got really horrible situation. And I didn't raise it. I didn't call it out because I was like, he's more senior than me. If I call that out, I'll probably lose my job. And told myself, you know, I'm just going to keep quiet and get on with it. And then started looking again for another job. This is around the time that I turned up to a Girl Geek Dinners event in London. I used to go to them fairly regularly, but most of the time, obviously, there's not just developer roles in technology. There's, you know, product managers and account managers and a whole host of other roles. And most of the other people were not developers. So I rarely bumped into actual developers, but I liked going to them and I liked connecting, and the networking was good, and it kept me sane with all the other stuff that was going on, and kept me excited and interested in the industry. Anyway, one day I turned from these events and there wasn't just one female developer in the room, there were two, and they were both from the same company, which was Thoughtworks. And at that point, I'd only ever worked with one other female developer in my 7-year career, who was on a different team to me in the company I was at the time, where I was being bullied. And I was chatting to them and asking them about Thoughtworks. And in fact, the person that I met that night, who referred me to Thoughtworks, who got my recruitment bonus for hiring me, she actually now works for me in my team. And then almost straight away, because that was really the defining, changing moment. Because before the Thoughtworks opportunity, I was like this close to being like, this whole technology thing, I'm getting kind of sick of it, right? I'd just gone through essentially being passed over for promotion because I was a woman, then being bullied, which, I found out later may have been because I was a woman. And then, there was this other opportunity in front of me that I was actually not sure that I wanted to take. But I had a really good friend who is a part of my core tribe, who said to me, you've been having a really rough time, but you've been talking about how much you like this company and what you admire about them, because they were, at the forefront of agile and really thought about things in the same way I did. And I was like, she was like, give it a shot for a year. And then if you don't like that, then maybe you can quit and do something else. I actually found out after I joined Thoughtworks, I was friends with the other female developer that was on the other team, and she got transferred to the team that I was on. And I also had to work with this guy who bullied me. And she called me one day and wanted to meet up. And she was crying and upset and saying, like, I'm experiencing all this bullying and I don't know what to do. And I felt terrible, because I was like, I already went through that. And because I didn't speak up, now you're going through it. So I was like, this is not okay. So I encouraged her to speak up, and she did, and he got moved and he eventually left. And I told myself after that, if anything like that ever happens again, I'm going to say something, not for me, because that was the thing that was worried me the first time. But if I focus on doing it for others and for those that come behind me, then I'm taking myself and my own insecurities out of the equation, and I'm focusing on how I can do good. Which is actually one of the kind of core principles of XP and Agile, is like, leave things better than you found them. And I really did, because things did happen overt and covert after that. And I have a laundry list, I'm sure most women do at this point in their career after 20 years of, I've had people, tell me I'm a cold-hearted B because I gave them critical feedback. I've had people tell me when I'm training them on something that I'm only successful because I prance around in a short skirt, which was almost like a line out of Bridget Jones. I couldn't believe that. And I was also slapped on the ass in a meeting. I was like, what the hell? And this time around, every single one of those things that happened, I actually, called up my PM, the account manager, the client principal, and said, this happened and it's not okay. And I was backed up and I was supported, and those people were reprimanded. And nearly every time they said something like, oh, you can't take a joke. You take things too seriously. I didn't mean it like that. And by the way, this was not thought workers. This was nearly always clients. So just so you know, I just saw somebody wow at Thoughtworks. It's like, well, at Thoughtworks, we work for clients, right? And so you can't control the kinds of environments. But what I will say is that every client that this was raised to, they did something about it and they took it seriously and they went through their procedures every time. But anyway, I realized I have 10 minutes left. So I'm going to jump forward because I learned a lot of lessons along the way that really helped me become a better leader. And I think one of the key things after all of that was I was kind of quite shy and quiet. And a lot of the work that we did at Thoughtworks, which I love, is just very collaborative and requires you to speak up in a team environment. And I was very used to speaking one-on-one and, believe it or not, incredibly shy in a large context and terrified of public speaking. And the thing that I've loved about Thoughtworks is they immediately said, well, we're going to beat that out of you. And we're going to look for opportunities where you can work on some of these things. And so in terms of the speaking up, because people were saying like one-on-one, Rachel has like some of the best ideas, but she doesn't say anything in a large meeting. And then so they sent me to India to be a Thoughtworks University trainer. So we basically have a Thoughtworks University for our grads. They come in, we send everybody to India. We used to send everybody to India and China, but send them all to India, and they all learn like the Thoughtworks approaches and processes and all the things that we care about in agile and continuous delivery. And these days it covers everything, data mesh, like you name it. And as a trainer for that, you have to get up and present content to like 50 people almost every day. You have to learn how to have crucial conversations and hard conversations. You have to like be firm but compassionate. This is a bunch of people fresh out of university. They come with all kinds of people problems, as you can imagine, that you've got to resolve. And that experience gave me the courage to learn how to public speak, how to lead, and enabled me to then, when I worked with a client executive and another client that was a real bully, not just to me, but to his entire team. And one day it wasn't the best consulting work I did. I got really mad and just yelled back at him after he yelled at me. And after that, he really respected me. And I was like, well, that was weird. That's not how you consult normally. But sometimes to stand up to a bully, you have to just stand up to the bully. But after all of that, I eventually land in the US as a technical leader. This was, the final moment of getting to New York City, wearing the power suit, but not with the shoulder pads, was to make it to New York. And this was, in theory, the last leg of the trip. I arrived in 2014 in a technical leadership role across New York, but it wasn't long before they promoted me into the North America CTO. And then obviously last year I became the global CTO for Thoughtworks. And I think that one of the secrets to my success is that I treat everything like everybody like they're a client, right? Everything is an opportunity to consult, an opportunity to find out what somebody wants, what the win-win is, how do you negotiate. And one of the things that Anne had talked to me about as we were preparing for this talk is that people often come into roles and they promised a certain team or they're promised certain things, and it's never there. And I'll be honest with you, it's never there. Even as the CTO, I'm asked to like reduce costs and cut my team, and you never have everything you want. And frankly, if you do have a full team, well, guess what full teams are? They're full of people, and most of leadership is just managing and leading people. And it's the hardest work because you need to, you've got to lead with compassion. You've got to know yourself. You've got to know what your triggers are. You've got to manage your emotions. But you also have to be firm. You have to have boundaries. All these really hard human skills that we're learning about. And what I think is wonderful these days is how open people are with mental health challenges. And this stuff really comes to light as you come into a leadership role, and the more pressure you're under, the more you see, where your challenges are and things that you need to overcome. And these are all just the hard human skills that are just more and more critical for leadership, because people look to you in a crisis. They look to you with like, where are we going? They look to you when they're, confused and lost. They look to you for so many things. And you're also a human too. So you're also trying to manage yourself. And that is really the critical piece, is to manage yourself. And I guess the other meandering advice I can leave you with, because I know we only have a few minutes left, is earlier in my career, I pretty much said yes to everything. And I only started saying no when I knew what I really wanted to do. And you can't know what you want to do until you said yes to a bunch of stuff and tried on a bunch of stuff and said, I'm good at that. I'm not good at that. I like that. I don't like that. And when you are ready, to say no. Make sure you're saying no for the right reasons. Because if the no is because I don't think I can do that, that's the wrong no. And I'll tell you that in this role I came into, and in the role before I had, where I was a global leader, I always talk to one of my best friends, who's another very senior technologist leader in another organization. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, ruminating on it and going back and forth. And she just sits there smiling. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you do this every time. Every time. She said, and you're always fine. You always figure it out. Now, do I get it all right? No. Do I make mistakes? Yes, tons of them. But that's just how it is. Like, you do make mistakes and you can't do everything. But you've got to continuously negotiate with the leaders. You've got to continue to negotiate with your peers. Frankly, you've got to often continue to negotiate with your team. And this is where those like crucial conversations, consulting skills and win-win really come into things. Because, you can't make everybody happy all the time. You can't be happy all the time. There's always going to be things about your job you don't love. But, you got to find enough of it that you enjoy. And again, it comes back to knowing yourself and knowing what motivates you. And when you're having a tough time and it feels like everything's going wrong and everybody's mad at you and things like that, which is very common as a leader, like, what is it that gets you up out of bed and gets you on with the day and gets you to continue to try and be motivating and inspiring in spite of all the challenges that are always going on? Last few things I'll leave you with is finding the right company. I hope my story explains to you how critical that is. And it's okay these days to keep changing jobs. When I was early in my career, people were like, can't keep changing jobs. You've got to stick with the same job. I'm so glad that isn't like that anymore. I mean, as a CTO, I love to kind of keep as many great people in my company as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to do what motivates you and what makes you happy. And there's so much opportunity out there. So if you are struggling and you are having issues in your own organization, there are other companies out there where you can find one that resonates with you. You don't have to put up with it. I would love it if everybody, learned from my lesson. And if something happens to you, they speak up, because, these things don't change if we all just kind of accept it as the norm and accept these micro and macro and direct aggressions and indirect aggressions. You have to find your tribe. I talked about, having other senior leaders I talk to in similar roles in other organizations when opportunities come my way, who I'm, can be open with and honest. But you've also got to find your allies and your sponsors and your network, and you've got to find your home tribe. I cannot express enough that, finding the right partner is so important. And if you want to have a strong and healthy career, you're better off with no partner than the wrong partner. And I could do hours and hours of talks on that. And then the last thing is, you have to keep learning in this industry constantly. And right now, tech is changing more than ever. It's always been changing. It's always been like that. But right now, Gen AI is kind of disrupting everything, for better or worse. And in my job as the CTO of a tech consulting firm, my job is to make sure that we're at the leading edge and one step ahead of clients. So we have to be on top of things all the time, and thinking about how does it impact how knowledge is shared, how it impacts whole teams, not just the myopic focus of the tech org, but like of the developers. But how does it impact every role on the team? How does it help us understand code? How does it help clients succeed? There's so much to think about. But I guess I will finally end by just saying, this was just my story, right? I hope some of it resonates with you, but your life is a journey. Your career is a journey. It's not a ladder. It can be whatever you want it to be. It's your design. And when you figure it out, like, remind me of that too, because I often forget. I'm done. I don't know if we have questions for Angie. I'm probably right on time.
You are right on time. Thank you so much for your candid story. Your journey was super inspiring, and I love the insights that you shared and great actionable tips for everyone today. So thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you for having me. Goodbye, everybody.